10 Terrifying International Murder Mysteries. Hey Creepshow fam, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into some of the most chilling and mysterious murder cases from around the globe. These stories are filled with eerie details, unexplained motives, and unanswered questions. Even decades or centuries later, the truth about these grisly crimes remains elusive, leaving us to wonder who really committed them and why. In this episode, we're counting down 10 chilling murder mysteries from around the world. Get ready for a whirlwind of terrifying tales from all corners of the earth. Number 10. The Family Murders in Australia. In Adelaide, South Australia, during the late 1970s and early 1980s, 5 young men fell victim to a horrifying series of murders. These victims were brutally tortured, sexually assaulted, and dismembered before their remains were discarded in remote areas around the city. Due to the chilling similarities between the cases, investigators quickly theorized that a single person or group was behind the atrocities. Authorities soon speculated that a group, rather than an individual, was responsible for these heinous acts. They dubbed this group the Family, suspecting that it consisted of high-profile, influential individuals connected to a pedophile ring. Despite widespread rumors and accusations, very few arrests were made, and the full extent of the group's membership remains a mystery. The only person convicted in connection with these murders was Bevan Spencer von Einem, an accountant. In 1984, he was convicted of murdering 15-year-old Richard Kelvin, the last known victim of the family murders. Though von Einem was linked to other murders and infamous Australian cases like the disappearance of the Beaumont children, no additional members of the family have ever been conclusively identified or brought to justice. Number 9. A Square Mile of Murder in Scotland. Glasgow, Scotland, became the backdrop for 4 of the most notorious murder cases between 1857 and 1908, all occurring within a small area known as the Square Mile of Murder. This stretch of Glasgow's West End witnessed decades of bloodshed, with the most famous of these mysteries leaving unanswered questions even today. The first murder took place in 1857, when socialite Madeleine Smith was accused of poisoning her lover, Émile Langelier. Despite the public and many experts believing Smith was guilty, her trial ended with a verdict of not proven, a unique Scottish ruling indicating insufficient evidence. In 1862, the Sandyford murder saw housemaid Jessie McLaughlin convicted of murdering another servant, Jessie McPherson, in a brutal attack. However, after a special commission reviewed the case, McLaughlin's death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, casting doubt on the integrity of her trial. Next, in 1865, Dr. Edward William Pritchard was convicted and hanged for poisoning both his wife and mother-in-law. There had already been suspicions that he had murdered a servant girl years earlier, but no formal charges had been brought against him at that time. Finally, in 1908, a botched robbery led to the murder of 83-year-old Marion Gilchrist, an event that became one of Scotland's most infamous miscarriages of justice. German Jewish immigrant Oscar Slater was wrongfully convicted of the murder and spent 19 years in prison before being exonerated. The true killer of Gilchrist was never found, and the Square Mile of Murder has since become a legendary chapter in Glasgow's dark history. Number 8. Botanist Killing in Indonesia. In 1913, Canadian botanist Charles Budd Robinson embarked on a botanical expedition to the Maluku Islands in Indonesia, eager to discover new plant species. Born in Nova Scotia in 1871, Robinson had worked in Manila, New York, and his home country before finding his true passion for exploring Southeast Asia's diverse flora. However, his exploration of the remote island of Ambon ended in tragedy. Robinson mysteriously vanished after his arrival, and a report from Mr. Van Dissel, assistant resident of Ambon, shed some light on what may have happened. According to Van Dissel's account, Robinson was killed by a group of locals in a remote part of the island. The botanist was allegedly mistaken for a headhunter, a deadly error that sealed his fate. There's an even more bizarre explanation that followed Robinson's death, a linguistic misunderstanding. Rumor has it that Robinson, not being proficient in Malay, approached a local boy and asked for a coconut. Unfortunately, he mispronounced the word kelapa, coconut, as kepala, head, leading the villagers to believe he was a headhunter, which ultimately resulted in his murder. Although the exact circumstances of Robinson's death remain unclear, the combination of miscommunication and cultural differences turned his scientific expedition into a tragic tale of mistaken identity. Number 7. Translator death in Japan. The publication of Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses in 1988 triggered global outrage in the Muslim world, which deemed the book blasphemous. In response, Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa calling for the execution of Rushdie and anyone involved in publishing the book. This death sentence wasn't an idle threat. Multiple attempts were made on the lives of those connected to the Satanic Verses. While Rushdie himself survived several assassination attempts, others weren't as fortunate. Norwegian publisher William Nygaard survived 3 gunshots, and Italian translator Ettore Capriolo survived a stabbing in his apartment. However, the Japanese translator of the Satanic Verses, Hitoshi Igarashi, wasn't as lucky. Hitoshi Igarashi, a 44-year-old assistant professor at Tsukuba University and an expert in Islamic culture, translated the Satanic Verses into Japanese in early 1990. Tragically, on July 13, 1991, just a year after completing the translation, Igarashi was found murdered in a hallway at his university. He had been brutally attacked, suffering multiple slashes to his hands and face, with a fatal wound to his neck. Despite the presence of blood stains and the discovery of type O blood at the scene, authorities were unable to identify the killer. The timing of Igarashi's murder, occurring so soon after his translation of the controversial book, led many to believe the two events were linked. However, no conclusive evidence was found to prove that connection. Even after dedicating a task force to the investigation, Japanese authorities were no closer to solving the case by 2005. Unfortunately, Japan's 15-year statute of limitations on murder cases means that even if the killer were to be identified today, they would no longer be subject to prosecution, leaving this chilling case forever unsolved. Hitoshi Igarashi's murder remains a dark and unsolved chapter tied to one of the most controversial literary works in modern history. The chilling mysteries continue, so stay with us as we explore more unsettling international cases. Number 6. Murder in the Woods, Wales. On June 27, 1946, 12-year-old Muriel Drinkwater vanished while walking home from school through the Pillargare Woods in Swansea, Wales. The following day, her body was discovered, having suffered a brutal assault. She had been raped and shot twice in the chest. The case became known as the Little Red Riding Hood murder, named after the red coat she had been wearing. A few days after the horrific discovery, police found the murder weapon, an American Army-issue Colt .45 pistol with a modern Perspex grip, likely from World War I. Despite this significant clue and a witness description of a man with thick, fluffy hair wearing brown corduroy trousers and a light brown sports jacket, the investigation stalled and the identity of the killer remained unknown. However, more than 60 years later, modern forensic techniques breathed new life into the case. In 2008, investigators were able to extract DNA from a semen stain found at the crime scene and developed a DNA profile of the suspect. Unfortunately, the national database did not provide a match, prompting police to manually compare the DNA with the 40-50 suspects from the original investigation, or more likely, with their descendants. While the killer remains at large, the new DNA evidence did clear one long-standing suspect, 75-year-old Hubert Hoyles. At just 13 years old, Hoyles was the last person to see Muriel alive, and for decades, suspicion had followed him. The DNA testing finally absolved him, and Hoyles expressed immense relief, stating that the murder had cast a dark shadow over his life. Number 5. Mathematical murders in the Netherlands. Dutch mathematician Willem Wim Klein, famously known as the human computer, dazzled Europe with his mental arithmetic abilities. Born in 1912 in Amsterdam, Klein turned his exceptional calculating skills into a circus performance, wowing audiences across the continent. His ability to outpace even the most advanced computers of the 1950s led him to a career as a scientific calculator. In 1958, Klein joined CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, in Switzerland, where he lived and worked for over 2 decades. Upon retiring in 1976, he returned to his hometown of Amsterdam, where he continued performing and breaking records. That same year, Klein earned a place in the Guinness Book of Records by calculating the 73rd root of a 500-digit number in just 2 minutes and 43 seconds, an achievement few could match. However, this brilliant mind met a tragic end. On August 1, 1986, Klein was found dead in his home, having been stabbed multiple times. His housekeeper discovered the gruesome scene, and police immediately arrested a young suspect. Yet, due to insufficient evidence, the suspect was released, and the case remains unsolved to this day. The motive behind Klein's murder is still debated. Some believe it was a robbery gone wrong, while others suggest his homosexuality made him a target in a time of less tolerance. Despite numerous theories, the person responsible for the death of one of the Netherlands' brightest mathematical minds has never been brought to justice. Klein's murder remains an unsolved mystery, a reminder that even the most brilliant minds can be subject to tragedy. As we continue down this dark road, more unsettling cases await, so stay tuned for the next eerie mystery. Number 4. The Crewe Killings, New Zealand. On June 17, 1970, Harvey and Jeanette Crewe vanished from their farmhouse in Pukekohe, New Zealand. Days later, Jeanette's father, Leonard Demler, visited their home, where he discovered their infant daughter, Rochelle, crying in her crib. Disturbingly, bloodstains were found throughout the house, but there was no sign of Harvey or Jeanette. The investigation turned grim when 2 months later, the bodies of Jeanette and Harvey Crewe were discovered in the Waikato River. Both had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle, and Harvey's body had been weighed down with a car axle, making it harder to find. Initially, police suspected a murder-suicide, but this theory was quickly dismissed. Suspicion then fell on Len Demler, Jeanette's father. Investigators believed there could have been a motive related to land inheritance. Jeanette had inherited half of her father's property, and it was suggested that she intended to buy him out. Len Demler's behavior raised eyebrows, but no concrete evidence linked him to the murders. The focus of the investigation soon shifted to Arthur Allen Thomas, a neighbor of the Crews. Thomas was convicted of the murders in a 1971 trial, and a retrial in 1973 upheld the verdict. However, the case took a shocking turn when it was revealed that 2 detectives had planted evidence to frame Thomas. In 1979, Thomas received a pardon after the injustice came to light, but no one, including the officers who planted the evidence, was ever charged with the double murder. To this day, the case remains one of New Zealand's most notorious unsolved mysteries, leaving the Crewe family without closure and the real killer still at large. The Crewe killings shocked New Zealand, and the lingering mystery around who committed the crime still haunts the nation. As we continue, more chilling murder mysteries await, so stay with us for the next unsettling case. Number 3. The Battersea Flat Murder, England. On July 16, 1910, stage actor Thomas Weldon Atherstone, born Thomas Anderson, was found dead under mysterious circumstances in Battersea, London. The police responded to reports of gunshots coming from Clifton Gardens and discovered Atherstone's body, dressed in bedroom slippers and holding a blackjack. He had been fatally shot in the face. Investigators quickly turned their attention to Elizabeth Earle, the tenant of the flat where Atherstone was found. Earle was Atherstone's former lover, and on the night of the murder, she had been dining with a young man named Thomas Frederick Anderson, Atherstone's son. The shocking detail that emerged was that Anderson was now in a relationship with his father's ex-girlfriend, a dynamic that led police to suspect a love triangle turned deadly. Given the tension between the parties, police initially theorized that young Anderson and Elizabeth Earle had conspired to murder Atherstone. The motive seemed plausible, but the lovers provided each other with alibis, and no definitive evidence could tie them to the crime. Witnesses reported seeing a man fleeing the scene, but none could give a detailed description, leaving investigators to wonder if Anderson might have been the mysterious figure. With no suspect in custody, the police eventually concluded that Atherstone may have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Their final theory suggested that while Atherstone was spying on his former mistress, a burglar entered the flat and shot him in an attempt to escape. Despite the theories, Atherstone's murder remains unsolved, leaving the truth behind this bizarre crime shrouded in mystery. The Battersea flat murder remains one of England's most perplexing cold cases. The mysteries continue as we delve into more eerie, unsolved crimes from around the world, so stay tuned. Number 2. The Death of Sharron Pryor, Canada. On March 29, 1975, 16-year-old Sharron Pryor left her home in Montreal to meet friends at a nearby diner. What should have been a short, uneventful walk quickly turned into a nightmare, as Sharron never made it to her destination. Her family's worst fears were confirmed days later when a beekeeper discovered her lifeless body in a field. Sharron had been brutally raped and beaten, and the presence of branches clutched in her hand suggested she was still alive when she was left in the field to die. The case sent shockwaves through the local community, and investigators began to piece together potential leads. Just before Sharron's disappearance, another woman had been attacked by a knife-wielding man in the same area. She was rescued by passers-by, which scared off her attacker. Police speculated that the same man might have crossed paths with Sharron, turning her into an unfortunate target of opportunity. One of the leading theories in Sharron's case is that two perpetrators were involved. This hypothesis is supported by the discovery of a man's shirt, likely used to bind Sharron, and a footprint left at the scene. The shirt belonged to a man who stood approximately 183 centimeters, 6'1", tall, and weighed around 90 kg 200 lbs. Meanwhile, the footprint indicated a smaller individual with a shoe size of 8 to 1 to 2, suggesting a potential accomplice. It's possible that the larger man, who matched the description of the attacker from the earlier assault, may have been responsible for abducting Sharron, while an accomplice helped dispose of her body. Despite these clues, Sharron's murder remains unsolved, and her case continues to haunt investigators and her family. Number 1. The Wonderland Murders, USA. The Wonderland Murders stand as one of Hollywood's most infamous and brutal crime stories, blending a deadly mix of sex, drugs, and violence. The gruesome killings took place on July 1, 1981, when 3 members of the Wonderland gang, along with an associate, were savagely murdered in their drug den located in the Hollywood Hills. The Wonderland gang was a notorious group of criminals who profited from drug deals and robberies across Los Angeles in the 1970s and 1980s. The murders were allegedly carried out as a retaliation from Eddie Nash, a powerful nightclub owner and drug trafficker. Days earlier, the gang had raided Nash's home, stealing valuables, drugs, and cash. During the heist, Nash was forced to beg for his life, and his bodyguard, Gregory Diles, was grazed by a gunshot. One of the most shocking elements of the case is the alleged involvement of John Holmes, a famous porn star. Holmes had been to Nash's house earlier on the day of the robbery and reportedly left the sliding door unlocked, allowing the Wonderland gang to break in. However, when Nash discovered Holmes's involvement in the robbery, he forced Holmes to reveal the gang's whereabouts. Holmes was later charged with murder in 1982, but he was acquitted. Eddie Nash and his henchman, Gregory Diles, were also acquitted of the murders in 1990. Before Holmes died in 1988, his ex-wife claimed that he had confessed to her about his role in the murders. According to her, Holmes had taken 3 men to the Wonderland house and watched as they brutally bludgeoned the gang members to death. However, Holmes never identified the attackers, leaving the full truth behind the Wonderland murders shrouded in mystery. And that's it for today's video, Creepshow fam. These global murder mysteries continue to haunt investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike. The motives, the suspects, and the gruesome details make these cases all the more chilling. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe for more spine-tingling true crime content. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, some mysteries are never fully solved. See you in the next video.